Alleluia, Christ is risen. The Lord is risen indeed. Alleluia. Man, I wish I had my camera. This is such a great, amazing. You all look so beautiful in your Easter finery. It's wonderful to see you all. Have you ever found yourself lost in the labyrinth of Penn Station during rush hour? Yes, I did. Just this past Monday. I had a meeting on the west side, so I had to go to Penn Station rather than Grand Central. And on arrival, I was completely disoriented. The endless corridors, those confusing signs pointing in seemingly contradictory directions, the feeling that I know I needed to catch a subway train, but being unable to find my way through the maze of tunnels, watching precious minutes tick by as I kept searching for the way to the subway. Or maybe you've had the experience of emerging from the subway in Manhattan and then turning in circles while you try and get your bearings, looking for a landmark, some tall building. But the others just block your sense of direction. And in those moments, the city becomes alien and intimidating. We've all been there, lost in places we thought we knew, surrounded by people, and yet feeling utterly alone. And then if you're lucky, cutting through the noise and confusion, you may hear it. Someone calling your name, a friend spotting you from across the concourse. And in that instant, everything changes. It's the same station, the same crowds, the same confusion all around. But now there's a point of contact and a way forward. That moment of recognition when someone who knows us calls our name in the midst of our disorientation, well, that's a moment of profound salvation and resurrection in miniature. In the chaos and confusion of our lives, we discover a fundamental truth. Love knows your name. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb. This story is remarkable. We read it every year at Easter, and yet it never loses its disorienting power for me. No matter how many times I hear it, there remains something deeply mysterious about this narrative. The timeline just seems jumbled. The reactions of the disciples don't make sense or follow a neat pattern. It's profoundly confusing, even after 50 years of hearing the same words. And perhaps that's precisely the point. Resurrection isn't something we can neatly categorize or understand. Its story disorients us because it fundamentally challenges what we think we know about how the world works. Mary Magdalene wasn't expecting resurrection that day. She came to the tomb prepared for death, carrying the weight of her grief. When she got there, she found the stone moved, and she assumed the worst. They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him. Mary's world was a Good Friday world, a world where death has the final word, where power crushes love, where hope seems foolish. Perhaps you recognize that world. Maybe you've been living in it. Peter and the other disciples race to the tomb, find it empty, and react differently from each other. Peter sees the evidence and remains confused. The beloved disciple sees and believes, but then just goes home. But Mary stays. Mary weeps. Mary waits in the gathering light of dawn. And then Jesus speaks just one word. Mary. Her name. That's all it took. In speaking her name, everything changed. She was in the same garden, on the same morning, but suddenly she was filled with recognition rather than grief. She turned and said, "Rabboni," teacher. And in this pivotal moment of transformation, we witness the power of being truly recognized. Love knew her name. Jesus doesn't invite Mary to stay in that moment. He says, "Do not hold on to me, but go to my brothers and say to them that I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary is commissioned. She is sent as the first apostle of the resurrection, the first person to proclaim, "I have seen the Lord." Now, you and I, we live in a Good Friday world, a world of death. Let's be honest about that. We live in a world where violence still seems to have the upper hand, where scarcity thinking leads us to hoard rather than to share, where fear drives many of us to build higher walls rather than bridges. But Easter declares that the Good Friday world, that Good Friday world, does not get the final word. Easter invites us to live as if resurrection is not just an event in the past, but a present possibility. But what does that look like? It looks like having the courage to change our minds when new light illuminates our path, the courage to change our habits when old patterns keep us trapped in cycles of death, the courage to change our view of the world, to see abundance where we once saw only scarcity. When Jesus called Mary's name, he wasn't just revealing himself to her, he was inviting her into a new way of living in the world. "Do not hold on to me," he says. "Don't cling to this moment. Instead, go and tell. Go and live. Go and embody the reality of resurrection." And that same invitation extends to us this day. We don't have to accommodate ourselves to a Good Friday world. We can choose to live as Easter people. When the world says revenge, we can choose reconciliation. When the world says there's not enough, we can practice generosity. When the world says protect yourself at all costs, we can risk vulnerability for the sake of love. When the world says that some people are beyond hope, well, we can reach across the lines that divide us with stubborn and insistent grace. Each act of reconciliation proclaims this Easter message: love knows your name. Like Mary in that garden, we have a choice in how we respond to the empty tomb. We can see the evidence and remain confused, like Peter. We can believe intellectually, but just go back to business as usual, like the beloved disciple. Or we can stay, we can weep, we can wait, and then, when love calls our name, we can turn and recognize and go forward, transformed. Think about those moments in Penn Station when someone calls your name through the chaos. Everything changes. Those same confusing corridors suddenly have direction. The same overwhelming noise is pierced by a voice that matters. We walk through that station differently after a moment like that, no longer lost strangers, but connected travelers with a clear destination. Our circumstances haven't changed, but our experience of them has been transformed by recognition and by relationship. That's the Easter invitation, to hear your name called by the one who knows you completely and loves you entirely, to recognize the risen one in our midst and not cling to the moment, but allow it to send us out as witnesses to resurrection in a world still bent towards death. When we accept this invitation, we embrace the transformative truth at the heart of our faith, that love knows your name. We cannot ignore Good Friday, but we don't need to stay there. Even in the darkness of death, even in the midst of our grief and loss, even when we are lost in an unfamiliar world, love still knows your name. Think of what this means today in a world that so often reduces us to numbers and categories and labels, a world where we can feel anonymous and unseen. Easter proclaims that you and I are known intimately and completely and by our name. Not just known but loved, not just loved but called. That moment when Mary heard Jesus speak her name in the garden wasn't just a turning point in her story. It was a turning point in human history. It was the moment when death's power began to crumble, when the shadows began to recede, when a new creation began to emerge from the ruins of the old. And that same voice that spoke Mary's name in that garden speaks to each of us even now. Through the noise of our busy lives, through the fog of our doubts and fears, through the walls we build to protect ourselves, that voice can still reach us, calling us back to life, calling us back to love, calling us back to each other. Friends, Christ is risen. He knows your name, and he's calling you to rise as well. So let's listen, let's recognize, let's rise and go. Alleluia, Christ is risen. The Lord is risen indeed. Alleluia.